Good evening, televiewers. Welcome to this first edition of Prime Hour for this week. Today, Monday, the 10th of October, 2022. An edition that is going to be dedicated to discussing the importance of Cameroon's diaspora, looking at whether it has contributed in building or destroying this nation. We are going to be looking at this very important topic with our panelists who are in the house with us already. We have Dr. John Ako, who is a lecturer across some higher institutions and universities in Cameroon, and also very active member of Cameroon civil society. Good evening, Doctor, and welcome.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine. Once more again, talking Cameroon and why not issues affecting the world. The diaspora in Cameroon, most often than not, has been accused of being at the origin of the political tension that range across the national territory. Some said they were not necessary and that Cameroon should never negotiate with such groups of people. But I think sincerely, before every nation develops, there is a need for its diaspora. There is a need for continuous consultation between those who have left, those who are still willing to live, and those who are considered the nationals of this nation, wherever they are.
We also are in the company of Mr. Tata Kwawi Mbinglo. He is a university lecturer, travel consultant, but also having lived out of Cameroon for over 7 years. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Mr. Kum Leonard, for having me. I think as someone who has spent over 10 years in the diaspora, this is a very interesting topic, and subsequently we're going to be sharing ideas and throw more light on it.
Okay. We also have Ngomba Mondoa, who is going to be coming in from Switzerland. He is a Cameroonian diaspora resident in Switzerland. We are glad to have you for the very first time on Prime Hour. Mr. Ngomba. He's going to be coming in from Switzerland. He is a Cameroonian diaspora resident in Switzerland. We are glad to have you for the very first time on. Prime Hour. Mr. Ngomba.
Thank you, Mr. Leo. It's a privilege to find myself on this platform to discuss on what concerns fatherland and the contributions that the diaspora can make, either positively or negatively. And it's a pleasure to share the platform with those back in the studio. Thank you.
Company of Paddy Asanga, resident in Hamburg in Germany. He's a regular panelist on Prime Hour. Good evening, Paddy, and welcome.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Leo. I think you are one of the most brilliant Anglophone journalists. We should be proud of this initiative, because it has been very, very educative, and the format of your program brings people across every board. So I'm happy to be part of this debate, because we are talking about the diaspora. The diaspora could be a solution, and the diaspora might be a problem also. So I'm glad to be part of this panelist, and let's get ourselves together and have a nice debate. You're welcome.
Okay, we'll start with you, Dr. John Ako. We are looking at Cameroon's diaspora, understanding who a diaspora member actually is. Are they necessarily the best brains of a nation?
They might not be the best. They might equally not have been rated. There is no barometer. I mean, there is no measuring instrument to give us who is good or who is bad, or that whether they were the best in their various domain.
Okay.
But one of the things that remains is why the diaspora, why and to what extent, for what reasons do we even have some people we call the diaspora? There's a lot of people left their country based on various reasons and what prompted them to leave their nation. And those particular instances have never left their mind. Some people left because of hunger, others left because of war, others for the search of a better life. For those who left the country because of searching for a better life, there is always a need that when that life is found, they have that possibility of coming back home. Some equally left because of nepotism and what we talk of durability in power, dictatorship, others abuse of human rights. Some people, like we have in Cameroon, the most outcry today that there is what we call the Anglophone marginalization. Some people felt like they don't belong, and that is why they go to where they feel they can be received. And so when they are received in such environment, coming back becomes a very hard decision. So a lot of them will take foreign nationality. And you can imagine, and to some people will tell you that home be home, meaning where they were well received, they prefer to use that as their home. And in future, what does such nations that have caused in the expulsion of its own very people, and again, you can imagine the refusal of such nations to accept some modern concept like double nationality, meaning those who have made their money abroad want to equally be protected where that finances. If you get into maybe later, you realize that in the terms of remittance, remittance as a foreigner is different from remittance as a national, meaning in terms of cost and even interest rate. I don't know what the cost on transfer of funds from one country to another. Once you are a foreigner, the interest rates are different. Once you are a national, the interest rates or what the cost on that amount is equally different. So somewhere you equally find a difficult moment for people thinking that those who feel they don't have the godfather, they cannot succeed. We have equally what I call violent elites. Some elites who feel that they should appropriate what belongs to a particular region and they hold it on to themselves. You find a father was a minister and a son becoming a colonel, and another person, meaning in that village, that is the only identity of the whole region. That those who come from Furawa, they were identified through Mr. Fu, and so Mr. Fu should be the lone family that represents the people. These are some of the things that I call those who feel that they can never belong to such regions, taking on foreign nationality even when they had left. There is a need that today in Cameroon, many governments may be regretting and considering that their citizens who have taken foreign nationality become foreigners to their own country. When they visit, they are given passport to stay for 1 month or 2 months. Does that really give a good mind of those who left in search of a better life, and on coming back, they are asked to have few days back at home? Of what interest should they even contribute, or why not build for the future of this particular nation? This is what has caused a lot of many of our diasporans becoming very violent. Can Cameroon really within its institution tell us that there is an institution that manages a flow between the Cameroonian diaspora and the government backs at home? They remain telling you that there are a lot of those agencies in the name of embassies, whom when you go to such embassies again, you find political representation and other types, some tribal origins being heads of such diplomatic missions, and it still creates the same problem back home, back to the diaspora or the receptive countries. It is really a chain of problem, which I think that first we should observe why there is a diaspora, and within the diaspora, to whom are we concerned with, and those who belong to Cameroon, how can we manage them? What problems cause them to leave? Have those problems been regulated? If not, then the Cameroonian diaspora will remain one of the most violent as we can see now.
Okay, raising this issue of a violent diaspora, I wanted us to go into it later on in the course of the program, but since he's raising it, you lived out there. What is the feeling that those you lived with out there in out of the country, the diaspora, yeah, what is the feeling they have of Cameroon?
Well, I must be very frank that out of 100%, I will tell you that 90% of those I lived with will not like to return to the country. Why it is, just as Doctor said, he rightly said, when a nation has bad policies that doesn't promote, especially diasporians, to come back and invest in their country, the love for the fatherland is no longer there. And take note, we have two categories of diasporians. We have those who have access back to their home country and those who can never return to the country so long as the policies of the state remains the same. For example, we have the issue of dual nationality. Now, there are many Cameroonians out there with foreign nationalities. What comes to their mind? Since I can't go back home, the only thing I should do now is to destabilize this government so that we might have a possibility of having a government in place that might favor us someday so we can have access to our fatherland. So these are some issues that we might take lightly, but the truth about it is until all Cameroonians in the diaspora have a feeling of belonging, understanding that this is their fatherland, they would build, no one would destroy. So for those destroying, there are those who have lost hope already. These are the facts about those living in the diaspora. Now, I came back to the country after a couple of years because I have the intention of building my nation. I'm looking towards nation building, and the only way I can contribute in nation building is being on the field, empowering the youth, and contributing my own quota.
Okay, so some of these actions, violent actions, or what may be termed negative actions, is also politically motivated. It is their way of trying to unseat the current system so as to bring a system in power that may recognize dual nationality.
Exactly.
Going by what you're saying.
Exactly.
But was that what they told you, or you are just...
No, this is an experience I have lived as a Cameroonian abroad. I have met a couple of them who cannot come back to Cameroon because the policy of the state do not favor them. So the only option they have is to ensure that the current regime leaves, they unseat the government, so a new system can come up and recognize them with dual nationality.
Mr. Leonard, maybe to add more of it, we need to understand that within policies, when you have been abroad, those who make the policies, those who finance elections, determine the policies of the nation. And most often than not, when you have a leader, which is yours, you know obviously if he wins an election, there is a need to change some policies. Not only even the concept of double nationality, a lot of Cameroonians have been expelled by this very government, have been indicted. A lot of them are waiting trial at any time they set their foot in Cameroon. So there is this particular negative feeling about the whole system which has been in place for over 40 years. That is what I talk of dictatorship and internal leaders. Those who feel like the nation belongs to them and that those who are not there cannot control today. So as they continue being in power, those who left and have become violent towards that regime, in fact, we are still to see where the Cameroonian government will carry peace missions to reconcile with its diaspora. And why not? Before the measure national dialogue, Cameroonians clamor that those who have been indicted by the Cameroon government, the government should come officially to withdraw all processes, legal processes or whatsoever against members of the diaspora. If there is a need, I believe there is that particular institution that will need to govern diaspora and the home-based government.
Paul Mondoa Ngomba, you are resident in Switzerland, and certainly you have been interacting with Cameroonians across the board, not only in Switzerland, but I'm sure other parts of Europe. What is the feeling you have of the Cameroonian diaspora when you look at the way they perceive Cameroon?
Thank you, Mr. Liu. Can you get me?
Yes, clearly.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Liu. I think putting the question as in a blanket format as you did might be a bit problematic, so I would like to dissect a little further.
Okay, go on.
One thing we should understand, one thing we should understand is that the Cameroonian diaspora is as fragmented as the political landscape in Cameroon. In the Cameroonian, because the equation that you raise equally puts that forward, like building and destroying, which leaves the presumption that there is a part of the Cameroonian diaspora that is out for destruction and part of the Cameroonian diaspora that is out for construction.
Yes.
Now, if you look at it logically and in the light of happenings, it's a bit risky to conclude that the diaspora has been positive or negative in the processes that are ongoing in Cameroon. The first I will look at the image of the country, and I will take a little from what Dr. Ako raised. He has put forward the whole question of dual nationality to be one of the fundamental drivers of violence, like, the violent component of the Cameroonian diaspora. But it's a bit intriguing. Now, the diaspora, we have to understand that having left the country, we have lost certain rights and privileges, even if we are still nationals. Because the reality, the daily reality of the country is lived by those there. Their involvement in the electoral processes, be it council elections, municipal elections, they are the ones living the reality. Now, the whole question about the whole concept of dual nationality has always been brought forward. And the question I ask most of the time is, how do you get this law changed to get Cameroonians gain dual nationality? It's obvious it's an act that must be enacted by Parliament. And as it stands, it takes those on the ground to bring up such debates in Parliament with the possibility of granting the dual nationality. But if you look at the conduct of the diaspora, they tend to disdain the country, they tend to insult those on the ground, they tend to try to dictate a law from the diaspora. And this brings a lot of fear and threats, where those on the ground would always want to preserve the little they think they have at hand, and as such cannot open up to the political dialogue that can lead to a potential revision of this law to give access to grant dual nationality. The other question I would want to raise, which would be more like challenging the diaspora, is if you can't get it, don't ruin it for others. When most of us left the country, some had the opportunity to have gained second nationality, which by default would extinct their Cameroonian nationality. It comes as a gift. That is, they have achieved something. But coming back to pick up the Cameroonian nationality without going through peaceful means, I think it's problematic. There are alternative ways we can go, strategies through which we can achieve that. Another question I would ask is, there is in countries like the US, where you have the whole concept of dual taxation of income. I remember I asked a question once, and I asked Cameroonians that, can we go in for dual nationality at the same time with dual taxation of income? None of those I discussed with would agree. So the whole idea should not just be looking at what we can get from the country. Let's look at what we can put back into the country. How many of us in the diaspora would admit to submit to dual taxation of income because we enjoy the dual nationality? If we have to be practical, if we have to be categorical, these are the type of things we have to look at. That aside, we cannot forget where we are coming from. And what I think, the least I think we should do is to preserve it at least for the families we have back home. If we have issues with the government, it should not be treated as issues against the state. There is a state and there is a government. If you are not in accordance with the government, don't ruin the country for those who are there. So I believe that the diaspora should look for an alternative to see how these questions can be addressed. And I believe that you must not necessarily have a dual nationality for investing in your country. You mustn't. We have the Chinese, we have the Lebanese investing everywhere in Africa. They don't have the dual nationality. If we support the development of enabling environments, then we can have these conditions to invest back in our countries if we want to invest. Thank you. I think that will be my first intervention, and I will join subsequently as the questions will be put forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Paul. Mondoa and Ngomba, we're glad to have you on this platform. Paddy Asanga, you are a very active member of the diaspora of Cameroon. We see you jet in and out of Cameroon on burning political issues, and you also have a lot of interactions with your guys out there in the diaspora. I want to get your appreciation of the role that the diaspora has contributed so far in the development of this country.
Yes, yes, Leo. Thank you for giving me that opportunity, and I'll put the diaspora in three categories.
Okay.
Because we have people who came to the diaspora under scholarship, under government scholarship. We have people who had genuine grievances with the government and left. And then we have economic refugees who are running or leaving Cameroon because they are looking for greener pastures. Everybody has his own agenda, his own leitmotif of why he or she is living where he or she is living. Now, when you put those categories of people together, don't expect them to have the same common goal. No, they don't. Don't expect them. When you try to dissect them, as my brother Ngomba just said, then you will discover that I will categorically say that the Cameroon diaspora as the Cameroon diaspora is not being viewed again as that driving force which was there to help people at home. I know that because I'm interacting with many, many people. So what my friend Ngomba just said, you see, there is active participation and constructive participation. And when you involve in constructive participation, you follow the train. But when you get yourself involved in negative participation, you automatically alienate yourself and the question of their nationality becomes obsolete. And that's what he was trying to say. You cannot expect somebody to brandish an American passport, telling you that this is my American passport. If I destroy Cameroon, if I buy guns and send to Cameroon, they cannot do me anything because I'm American. And you expect people to vote law to favor such people. It cannot work. It doesn't work. On the contrary, you say, I am a Cameroonian living abroad. In my native village, instead of contributing money to give boys to go and buy guns, you contribute money to make boreholes when there are no water. You put money together and buy a generator and you supply it to that village. The day you come and ask their vote, they all support you. You don't go and burn school and think that when you burn the school, they will look at you, at the diaspora, as a positive force. We have lost that credibility, that respect that they used to have. You listen to the boys whom some of these people in the diaspora have sent guns to. You hear the language that they say. There is one General Ayeke before he died. He said he used some languages that I will not use on this platform. Now, the corrupt mentality that we brought from back home is existing in some of us here in the diaspora. That's why you hear people insulting themselves, accusations and counter-accusations. But when you look at the political class, the practical political class, the constructive diaspora, they will bring you discussions like Ngomba just told you. Because there are people here who say they don't want to account for look for my money, and they will do everything. But if when you sit with those people together, you will not have a constructive debate. You will not move forward. If you go and sit together with somebody who came to the diaspora as a fair man, what will you talk with a fair man? When you go and sit, so you want to discuss with somebody who swam across the Mediterranean Sea, whereas you came here on scholarship, you will not have any constructive thing coming from him. Then this other category of diasporans who came here on scholarship, some of them have tested the privileges of this country and they are refusing to go back to serve their nation, whereas those scholarship holders have a contract with the government. So we have to look at these three categories of people and then you will know how to engage them. But this other violent diaspora that is coming, they are just economic refugees, and some of them are practicing those violence because they want to stay here. They will use that as a means to go and look for their status, to go and legalize their staying here, saying that they were political activists. Somebody who has never done anything, he comes here and he has never heard him say anything about politics in Cameroon. But because he comes into the diaspora and discovers that he has to get his papers through marriage, through a child, through humanitarian, or through political asylum. He becomes an activist and all sorts of lies. He talks about things that he doesn't know about.
Okay.
Those are the category of people that we have in the diaspora, and I don't think that anybody here will contradict me. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you very much. We've just been joined by Prof. Mark Anthony. I also want to get his first appraisal of Cameroon's diaspora, going by what they have been able to achieve for the nation so far. Are you very pleased with what a diaspora has been able to achieve for the nation so far?
Thank you, Mr. Leo, and thank you to all the Cameroonians and Africans watching us around the globe, and to my fellow panelists. To respond to that question, I want to begin by mentioning that in 2020, the total contribution of the diaspora to Cameroon's GDP was 0.9%. And that is to tell you how poor it was, I mean general, in Cameroon. And we are not limiting to, let's say, the southwest or the northwest region. We are talking about Cameroon generally. So if the GDP in 2020 was 0.9% contribution that was made by the Cameroon's diaspora, it means there is a problem with what they are contributing to the growth of the country. But if you want to look at the destruction that has been done towards the economy of the nation, I want to say that some of these diasporans have contributed towards the destruction of the nation. I mean, when we want to look at the two regions, northwest and southwest, you realize that most of those who sponsor the crisis in the northwest and southwest are sitting in the diaspora. You have individuals whom we could call their names here, whom are well known for the destabilization, I say the destruction of these two regions. It is true that we have a crisis that we were supposed to be handling, and we thought that might be the best way for the diaspora to have helped was to come in with their know-how, because I think going over there and learning from the white man was supposed to be a means for them to assist in the development of our nation. But from what we can see, I want to be categorical in saying that most of them have not been contributive. You see, before 2020, the diaspora used to do a great work, because I will be sincere in telling you that these guys used to actually contribute towards, I mean, they used to contribute majestically, let me use that word. Most of the structures that you saw in the northwest region were built by these guys. Most of the, in fact, money used to leave the west and come to Cameroon in high quantities. But recently, it has become something different, where individuals choose to use their money to buy arms, to actually empower our brothers and sisters to kill one another, instead of giving them money to actually start businesses, or in one way or the other, instead of giving them money to actually begin to go to school. I think if we have to use the right words, the assessment of their contribution from 2016 up to this particular moment has been limited. It has not been like it was supposed to be. And the results that we have on the ground can speak for itself, because we do not need a magician to come here and use a magic wand to tell us that their contribution has actually been negative. I mean, now I'm limiting it to the northwest and the southwest region. It doesn't mean that the diaspora per se has not been contributive. They have been doing their best, and there are some that are still doing everything possible to contribute towards the development of the nation. And so we can't put all of them in the same basket. In everything there are extremists, and we have extremists already working, which we know them and we can name them, destroying and destabilizing the economy of the nation, and actually forcing a lot of persons to get into poverty. This is the contribution of some of the diaspora, creating more poverty situation.
Okay, creating more poverty situation. Dr. Ako John Ako, we're talking about the diaspora. Love for nation, what perception did most Cameroonians have of the nation even before they left? That would also have made them to hold same old contrary position out of Cameroon.
Yeah, one of the things we should try to learn, you need to know that before the 1990s, Cameroonians went out. If you see what Paddy was trying to talk about, a lot of Cameroonians who went out on scholarship came back home. A lot of Cameroonians who went out on scholarship after studying, they came back home.
To Cameroon, yeah.
These are a lot of them now who instead destroyed the foundation under which the nation was constructed. And if you look at that, those who left after the 1990s economic crisis still believe that 40 years after, the circumstances that pushed them out of the nation have not changed. The situation has gone worst. How do they return back home that the situation they left is still instead going down or melting down? It is the reason which we need to think. Why was the Cameroon diaspora? We were told sincerely in the past that People were given scholarship based on meritocracy. And that today, a lot of scholarships given, mediocrity has taken the corridors of a lot of ministries. It is surprising that we don't even know those who are out of the country on scholarship. They are always nationally celebrated in their various domains. And when they come back, there is always a feast to receive them in various domains. They are recruited directly and then given responsibility to give to us what they studied abroad. But do you know the diaspora we had in Cameroon that came after 1990? A lot of them came lobbying for political power. And the moment that political power is given to them, they become hand clappers and praise singers. And they have ended up clapping their hands and praises to the detriment of the state for stomach or self-centered and egoistic interests. Can the diaspora that left in 1990 think of coming back to Cameroon? What has changed? Ask them very well. Those who went to Canada, the UK, came back home as primary school and secondary school teachers were given payable, concise and well-stable salaries. Primary school teachers were on 350,000, secondary school teachers were on almost 500,000 francs a pay rate. After the 1990 cases, salaries were slashed down by 65%, which means Cameroonians were living at less than almost 35% of what they had. What is the taste of coming back home after being trained with the knowledge you have gained? The knowledge of brain circulation, which Africans left in 1990 because of the policy. The West too, they have a policy of brain drain. Brain drain is that we bring them, we encourage them, we train them, give them the money, and discourage them going back home. When you are unable now to cause them to come, what are you saying? You are indirectly telling them to stay back in the host nation. And some had forgotten that they were even on scholarship. They are the same people now fighting abroad. They have that love for motherland. Somebody will tell you that taking an American passport, maybe some people are not aware, permit you to maybe enter more than 156 countries in the world without a visa. You only sign a visa in the port of entry. These issues of thinking that your nation, when you get to trying to find out the stability of your country 40 years after. I remember when President Ahmadu Ahijo visited Washington for the first time. We still have those images. I still doubt if a Cameroonian leader will be received in the same light in Washington. We mean the nation as a whole, after 1970, had some respect vis-a-vis other nations. But today, honestly, people doubt Cameroon's image. People doubt those who are even managing Cameroon. People are even afraid to invest. Where is the assurance? When a nation, instead of building bridges between the diaspora and the home nation, nations build barriers and walls. What do you think? How do they come back? What atmosphere are you giving? What caused them to leave? What had changed 40 years after? When we answer this question, you visit the situation in Ethiopia. People don't know. You need to visit how many government bonds the Ethiopian diaspora spent to develop their nation. How many government bonds Nigeria sell every day for Nigerian diaspora? Meaning people want to invest in the government, send money back home because you are sure that your money will be used. Not where a bag of cement sold ordinarily at 4,400 becomes 16,400 under government bonds. Nobody will invest. Where a bag of a tube of sand, which is 70,000 on normal pay sheet, becomes 700,000 on government project. Which diaspora will invest in such a crazy and expenditure-oriented government? We cannot. There is a need for assurance. If we need to prompt the diaspora, there are a lot of Cameroonians abroad with money. Remember, maybe some people are not aware that somebody like a Sili Menye left the World Bank to serve the nation. But what did he receive back? He said he thought Cameroon had changed because being in the government for over 10-15 years, he became a victim of the system and was almost thrown into prison. Luckily, he dodged himself out and refused and is saying presently never to come back. Imagine those circumstances as the judiciary change, where the presumption of innocence is presumed until you are judged or tried or found guilty. Is the nation judiciary not still in the hands of a single leader? We need to see, in fact, the political, the socio-economic, and many social realities in Cameroon had not changed since 1990. The presentations are there. What do we have? What education? Check on the international classification. Where do we find our citizens? Are they not suspects in every nation they are? Are they well received and treated as they are? Even nearby Equatorial Guinea and Gabon, we are beaten and flogged out. Then what becomes of abroad?
Okay.
So there are a lot of doubts.
Okay.
If the diaspora can really come back 40 years after to invest in Cameroon.
Yeah, the diaspora, but can we also conclude, assume that these guys want political power and are frustrated because it is not given on a platter of gold, especially with those who have dual nationality. They want to have a say in politics in Cameroon, but they don't have the means, not the means, the laws does not permit that.
Well, I think, first of all, getting into politics at some point is a decision you make because probably you want to step ahead out of your comfort zone. If you're a businessman, if you've made it in life, politics cannot be a push factor for you to return home. Most of these diasporans are not really interested in political power, but just as I said before, the policies of the state remains the determinant, the main factor that determines the success of that country, especially the economic part. Take, for example, I've lived out there for 10 years, and if I calculate my earnings within this 10 years, it should be getting to about 100 million. Now, the investments back home shouldn't be less than 70 million. It means that we individually and collectively are contributing to the growth of this nation. But what do we get in return? Here in Nigeria, Nigerians are investing. If you look at their economy, if you look at, diasporans building the country, majority of work done in Nigeria is done by the diasporans. Why? Because they have access to their country, even with dual nationality. But with us, Cameroonians, as I told you earlier before, more than 90% of those I was with out there will not want to come back to Cameroon, even if I became the president today. Why? Because they already know that, as Doctor said, 40 years later, the economy is the same. Everything remains stagnant. We have a problem at the level of policy making. If we do not accept and change that, irrespective of all the accusations, be it diasporas or nationals here, we are all facing the same economy. Cameroon. No one is better because he is back home here. Go to the seaport, look at the number of containers cleared every day. Where are they coming from? These people are walking out there day and night. You buy a car for 10 million, you have to clear for 30 million in your own country. And Cameroonians prefer to go to neighboring countries to buy cars just because you can't survive your own poor, your own custom. These are the things that discourages diasporans. We would have been far better than what we are today if we gave these people the opportunity, the feeling of belonging, the chance to invest in your country without all these taxes. And at the end of the day, this money is embezzled by a few individuals, and the story ends up they are being locked up. Where has the money gone to? This is hard-earned money. Stay out there for 2 years and also come and tell the story. I know what they go through. In the hands of the white racist, even to get a job as a black, they do odd jobs. And the little money they send home, either the families mismanage or the government taxes and all that. At the end, they are frustrated. How do you encourage these people to invest back in the country? These are issues we must address. And if I had access, or when I will have access to our parliament, these are the things that the state must address. We should let our people have freedom of nationality. Let them have the dual nationality. It doesn't affect anyone in any way. It builds the nation.
Good evening, Mr. Kum. Since we are talking about diaspora, it's worth mentioning the Cape Town Association of Atlanta that has provided boreholes in all subdivisions of Meme, specifically Kumba 1, Kumba 2, and Kumba 3, thanks to the Cape Town Association of Atlanta. Many inhabitants of Kumba can now have potable drinking water. We all know water is life. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Liu, and the entire crew on board. Mr. Liu, a house planned to be built, if delayed, may end up not constructed, probably because the money has been mismanaged and the building materials formerly bought sold. The diaspora had good intentions towards building Cameroon, but since they have been blocked for a very long time, they are now seen as destroyers. Etienne Fonyoy, writing from Bamenda. Now, Paul Mondoa, Ngomba, how is the diaspora blocked from investing back home? You live out there. Hello?
Yes, Paul, you are on number.
Oh. Hello,
Mr. Liu.
Yes. Did you get my question?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I want to pick from what the panelists on said, and the first thing I want to put across is that every faraway forest is green. When we stand at a distance and we look at the diaspora, we see all is green. I got your question. So, when you move from the diaspora, from Africa or Cameroon specifically, and move to the diaspora in the expectation that you are going to get greener pastures, and you end up not getting those greener pastures, then, like my brother Paddy raised a while ago, the whole problem of resentment against the country arises. You start getting things like the patriotic diaspora and the counter diaspora, and you have issues like, for us, unfortunately, when the Anglophone crisis started, all of us Anglophones were treated as amber and were perceived to be those against the country. And when you get closer, you come to realize, like Mr. Mondoa said, that what has changed during the past 40 years. And a quick question one would ask:
hello, Mr. Mondoa, please.
What has the diaspora contributed in changing during the past 40 years?
Hello, Mr. Mondoa. You have two audio sources. Can you shut one down?
Mother Africa and Fatherland Cameroon. If the politics are not good, how do you fix? Where have you contributed in fixing that politics? Who have you empowered to participate in politics? Who have you educated politically to get involved? How do you trigger this whole idea of emancipation to see that the laws are changed for the betterment of the country? How many people have you encouraged to get registered on electoral registers? When there are presidential elections, how many have registered in the diaspora to vote? We all got the 2018 elections, results of the presidential elections. The Cameroonian diaspora, which is estimated at about 8 million, we know the figures and the number of those who voted. We should not expect people to do it for us. It's a matter of us being committed. If you want it to be changed, then get involved for it to be changed. If you think you can commit to buying arms, why don't you think you can commit to sponsor a political party or support a political alliance back home that can bring change? And the irony about the diaspora involvement in politics has just been reduced at the level of the change of the president. That's unfortunately what we tend to see. How many diasporans have sponsored or supported parliamentarians, councillors, or senators in their constituencies? Those they can reach, those who can be a vector of the message they carry, those who can carry the message of change they want. I think it's good, but it's a bit embarrassing to see that we take a discourse between the diaspora and the government to be perceived as the opposition against the party in power. It's a bit intriguing to see that, because the perception I get from the studio is that the government is keeping the diaspora away. I think the country, not just the government, is keeping the diaspora away. What have we done to see that I have my Cameroonian nationality, I have my Cameroonian passport, and it moves into 20 countries? What have I contributed to empower that passport of mine? Those who tell themselves they are within the Schengen zone, for example, they move to 22, 23 countries with a single passport or a residence permit. What have we done to see that Africa gets to that level? What have we done to see that Cameroon gets to that level whereby you have a Cameroonian passport and you can move around without a visa? And the simple question I asked the other time, I'm in for dual nationality. The basic question I would ask is, how many of those seeking dual nationality would accept double taxation of income as a contribution to building back the country back home? If we are okay on accepting dual nationality and accepting dual taxation of income, I accept. I take cases like the National Social Insurance Fund that came up with the voluntary insurance for the self-employed. I personally I encouraged friends that we all have to retire back home. This is a product that is available for us. How many of us from the diaspora are participating in that project? It's open. You keep your money, it's your money. And you tell yourself the government has put barriers. What are these barriers? What have contributed in moving these barriers? So it's the whole discourse put to be it does not go well. The diaspora needs assurance. It needs insurance, but it has failed them assurance and insurance to the government. So if we want to get this assurance and insurance from the government, we should be prepared to sacrifice to see that the government uses us as an insurance. And if we want to capitalize on sending money back home, we are beefing the value of the currency. How many of us how many of us spend in Africa? How many of us think that we can contribute? People send remittances and make as if decided the cases to consume. The advantage that we are working on a stronger currency. If you sacrifice a month of your salary, it's very possible to get a borehole in your community. Most have done that. So these are the things I think we have to look at. The country must only be built by a collective effort. If we wait to see that those back home or rules like Dr. Akko said, where scholars not come back, you use the country's resources to the country.
Okay. The sound system is not the best. We have issues with connection. Good evening, Mr. Kum, and to you all in the studio. I thank God for giving you as one of the best Anglophone journalists of our time. Please just try to tell Mr. Paddy that we are not discussing on Anglophone crisis, but on destroying or building our beloved country, Cameroon. As for me, I always had to go out of the country because the nature of doing business is not favorable because of the nature of our government policy. So it makes it difficult to invest in Cameroon. Mohammed and friends writing from Casablanca in Morocco extend my greetings to Mayor Eseme of Kumba, One Council. Thanks. Mr. Liu, you don't always read my messages. I like you don't. One, I'm contributing to your programs. Mohammed, please. It's just that I don't see them. There are so many at times. Good evening to you in the studio. Mr. Tata did hit the nail on its head. We can talk from now till 100 years to come if our government doesn't realize that high custom duties are killing the growth of this country. If Cameroon's taxes happen to be like what Nigerians have, with our little population compared to Nigeria, we will be better developed. How can we explain the fact that a 200 million plus country is better governed compared to a 26 million population? Cameroon is seriously sinking. Terence Ayuk is writing from Mutengene. Good evening to you, Terence. Actually, greetings, sir. Please, I have some questions to ask about the African diaspora. Some diasporas are visible, others are not. Some diaspora are active, others are not active. In that situation of a combination of visibility and invisibility, articulation and lack of articulation, perhaps one should begin with the question of what is exactly the diaspora we are talking about. As we know, on voluntary forced movement of captives out of the African continent, what we know as the slave trade was a trade which was not simply transatlantic. It also was trans-Saharan and trans-Indian Ocean, and therefore we would expect diasporas to be a product of all three forced movements of people. Why are some diasporas visible and others not visible? To what extent does it have to do with the particular context of, let me call them the host countries? Where are the diasporas located? To what extent does it have to do with these countries and characterize the practice of a culture of forced assimilation? Okay, it's too long. Actually, you say a history student. Now, Paddy Asanga, we are talking about the investment climate back home. Very difficult for many diasporans to come back home and invest because of what persons are saying on this platform. You come in and out. How difficult is it for you guys to invest back home?
Leo, you know, in many African countries which are post-colonial, countries created by the United Nations, we have to understand that the mentality of those of us living in the diaspora is very different from maybe the Jewish diaspora that influences policy in the US. We should start looking at it from that perspective and ask ourselves the question, how does the Cameroonian, or how can the Cameroonian diaspora influence policy to their favor? If you have an answer to that question, no matter which government, no matter how bad or good the government is, that will be a policy that will be pursued. And I was in a symposium when this whole thing started, and I was talking to my friends who call themselves today ambassadors. I say, instead of us buying guns, we should try to interfere where the government fails, so that at a certain point, we will have parliamentarians that we can lobby for them to vote laws that will favor us. If our problem is high taxation, we lobby these parliamentarians, they go into parliaments, they go into councils, and then they sell our idea. But when you get into that point of resignation, and then you think that somebody will do it on your part, or you just feel entitled, it becomes very, very difficult. So I don't want to come and be a populist here just because I want to please a particular class of people who are commenting on Facebook. No, we have to be factual. We have to be surgical when we are touching very sensitive topics like this. APAC, which is a Jewish diaspora lobby group in America, influences the American policy because they put in money, they put in time, they know the people to talk to, and they go and watch it with their hands. When they talk about lobby is another way for where corruption in American politics, because they go and pay people to vote laws that favor them. And if we are that diaspora that has that economic force, that we have the money that we can go down and do as my friend Wilson Esema and his group started in Ngomba, we do it in all our 13th division, and then we win all the seats against the ruling government or the ruling party. That's how it happens. There is no magical solution to that. If you say, okay, when we are going to parliament now, our doleance is that you are going to unite or fight for us to get a double nationality. You are going to parliament now to put this case, make it policy that diaspora cannot pay. If you buy a car that costs 10 million, you cannot pay twice the amount as custom duty, at least half the amount. So all those things can be done, but at what cost? You see, it's very easy to say that the diaspora is sending a lot of money. Yes, they are sending a lot of money, but how much? What is the collective project of the Cameroon diaspora as a whole, apart from association? What is the collective project of associations. And then what are the diasporans doing to their individual families? When you look at those different points, you understand exactly where the problem is, because I am not just here to do populism for populism. I hope one day that we, those of us who are politically engaged, we shall be able to run that country, and we will have to look at the situation from that angle. Because if we make it a principle and a policy that we are going to enact change, then we have to create the environment ourselves. Those people who are sitting in power, they are not going to give you. You can cry from half moon to full moon, so long as they are conserving their power and they can go and do certain things to get votes that you cannot get, because you are not on the ground and you are not doing anything. You are instead looking about your immediate family or your immediate association. No. When I had this discussion in 2017, when this whole idea of buying guns will come and so on and so on, you are buying guns to go and give who? Go, you don't vet people, you cannot vet them. And at a certain time, the thing will go off hand. And after having lived and witnessed Canadian, let's say Arabic diaspora, Ghanaian diaspora, Nigerian diaspora, we can learn from them. But in our case, as my co-panelists just said, we are as divided as I cannot say, as a jigsaw puzzle. It's incredible. And we want to sit here and do political populism for something which is very clear. It's a very shameful thing, Mr. Liu. I'm listening to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Paddy Asanga. All diaspora are not saying anything meaningful today. Maybe they don't know where they come from. Okay, policy in Cameroon, is controlled by the CPDM. By Elias, writing from Malabo, for real, our country is confused. The government needs full correction for us out of home. Okay, good evening, Mr. Leo from Mr. Misko from Mutengene. Normally, they need to sell this country and share the money to every citizen that have national ID card, in fact. Okay, good evening to you. The system is not encouraging. That is why things are the way they are. Are Andrew Agbo, writing from K-Town. Good evening to you all. Good evening, sir. Mr. Leo complaining about the government all the time is just a cover-up song by diaspora. The same way they used to smuggle arms home, they could use the same tactics if they really had interest in developing our home. It's Elvis writing from Bamenda. Now, Prof. Mark Paddy Asanga talked about the lobbying force of the Jewish diaspora. So many persons want dual nationality. Mr. Tata raised the issue of custom duty. Is that something? Are these projects that the Cameroonian diaspora could take up and maybe could be said to have failed to push this through?
Mr. Leo, it is true that we want to appreciate other African nations for might be advancing in actually assisting in the development of their countries. But I want to say something. Generally, the black man finds it difficult to actually associate, to have the force to be able to bargain. And that is a limiting factor we have, which is not only going to be in relation to our diaspora, but even us here at home. So we will wish to see them get to that place where they can come together and build a force which they can use to bargain back at home. Is going to be a nice thing. But as long as I know the mentality in which most of us we have, each individual goes to Europe or to the US or wheresoever they go with the intention of fending for themselves. They don't care about the next person. They do not care about Cameroon. They care about their families and themselves. So that's where we have a problem. If they had the intention, then they will come together and do that. But I wish that can happen. You see, we have discussed several things here, and when I went back looking at the remittance that you receive we receive in Cameroon from the diaspora, I asked this question: is it like the Cameroonian diaspora doesn't have a family back at home? Because we will say that they are actually doing a lot. But compared to other African countries, I want to look at what happened in 2017 when you go to Ghana. The remittance that came into Ghana was close to 2,000 billion francs CFA. And the same year, what came into Cameroon as remittance was 185 billion francs CFA. That, if you want to compare, there is no means of actually putting the 200 kilo. It means that the Ghanaians think more of, we need to send money back home. We need to send money, because that is the main intention for which they went over there, to see how they can help their families back at home. We are not refusing that our diaspora is not doing something. When you look at the current situation in, let's say, in Senegal, remittance into Senegal is about 8% the GDP of the country. You go to Comoros, it is 13% in the country. You go to a place like Benin, it is 6%. But when you come to Cameroon, at the current situation is 0.9%. So you start asking the question, what is happening with the diaspora of Cameroon? And this research was actually carried by UNDP, and they gave, like, okay, we need to see how to encourage our diaspora to be able to turn back and see how they can invest at home. Okay, we see, when we are talking, I'm not even talking about the investment situation. I'm talking just at the remittance that is sent back home. Direct money that we receive from these guys. When we look at the idea of investment, yes, we can blame that the government has stringent policies that do not actually allow most of them coming to invest, which is very problematic. But we have some of them and a lot of them that are investing. If you could quote names, not for the sake of publicity, we have a brother who used to be with us here, Tata, Emmanuel, who is having a company, is established in Yaoundé. That is very powerful. He was a diaspora and he's here back investing and is moving. I think there are many of them. He
lived 10 years in the diaspora. It's in Cameroon.
Good. So those are some of them who actually make us to believe that the diaspora, some of the diaspora, is thinking of our home. But to say that the work, in fact, what they have been doing is effective and is empowering, we have a problem with it. And most of the times we have this tendency of always pointing it back to the government. But I believe that for some of them who came back and did something and are still on it doing, how did they manage to overcome the government in that case that others cannot do? Because we should not always want to look for a means to blame others. We already know that the state of Cameroon has been under a yoke for a while. This is more than 40 years. The state of Cameroon had been hijacked. And so there is nothing that we should, in fact, we can't fold our arms and say, oh, because the government does not want us to do this, we are going to sit. It is very, very unfortunate if we take that direction. When I look at the custom duty of a country like Cotonou, when you go to Cotonou, to bring a car in is very cheap as compared to Cameroon. Just imagine you have to buy a car over there, let's say for about, let me just give a sum, $5,000. Then you need to bring it into Cameroon. You pay more than $5,000 just to,
3 times.
So at the end of the day, you start feeling like your own country does not love you. And so it becomes a problem. But has that stopped some from doing it? No, it hasn't. And so I think that, yes, our government is one of our greatest limitations in this country. But we, as Cameroonians, for the love of our nation, should be willing to do beyond what the government expects from us. Because I will say this, Mr. Leo, without blinking, if we had a different government in Cameroon, Cameroon would have been far by now. We have the potentials. We have individuals who are, in fact, they have learned enough and they have the capacity to be able to take this country to the next level. But once they step into the country, most of them are fought. I mean, the atmosphere, let's forget about the system. The atmosphere of the country becomes a problem towards their progress. And the system has been constructed in a way where if you are not working in it, you do not excel. And so it is very, very problematic. But I will still come back and say that Cameroonians, it becomes our responsibility to change it, not expecting that those who are sitting in the government should change it. It's our responsibility. And if we shy away from our responsibility in doing what we can do to change the nation, then indirectly we would have surrendered it to these individuals. But I don't think that is what we need. And so coming back to dive on that your question, Mr. Leo, it is necessary that our diaspora should take that initiative of creating a body that permits them to influence the policies that are defined in this country. Because if they do not have a say in the policy making of the country, then they will not have the capacity to contribute. And so to give you the platform. So Mr. Leo, in my last words in that the question, I'll say I believe that the salvation of Africa and the salvation of Cameroon is found in the hands of the diaspora. And that, I think that we must encourage the diaspora to come back home and do what is necessary to change the state of this country and Africa as a whole.
Okay, to change the state of this country and Africa as a whole. We're talking about our lobbying. We have seen the diaspora, especially that of Cameroon, mobilize for public manifestations in the diaspora. You guys are going to come in, Paul Mondoa and Paddy Asanga on this, but I'll start with you, Dr. Ako. We've seen them in Paris, so many of them in the US. And what is the impact? What is the message that they want to drive across? And how does that help to build Cameroon in particular?
Yeah, at times when people talk, like Paddy just said, I want maybe Mr. Paul Mondoa is living in a different atmosphere. I don't know the last time he left Cameroon and how he's thinking. Paul Mondoa still thinks that in Cameroon there's a difference between the state and the government, and which I've said to you that these things have been close up. We don't know where is the state and where is the government in Cameroon, because properties of the states have been found in people's backyard, and a lot of it, some positions have been appropriated for 40 years. No other Cameroonian have access to. It makes us not to know whether there is a state and there is a government on the other. You go, the ruling party has housed himself in a state building. We don't know to whom he pays house rent. And a lot of that, now other political parties to succeed, they need to pay rent. And at times even the government sitting has blocked them access to their own very homes where they rent as offices. So when you look at a country of that nature, Paddy is trying to compare Cameroon and the Israelites a diaspora. I don't know whether Paddy is aware that Cameroonians have died in Qatar, others have been held hostage in Dubai and United Arab Emirates, and that the government of Cameroon does not care. Try to touch one Israelite on the streets of Pakistan. That's when you know that the government of Israel protects its citizens wherever they are in the world. I need to see that responsibility. Where soldiers of Cameroonians are killed and the president stays in the palace and sends a messenger to receive. You need to see if there is that identity of protecting first. Who is a Cameroonian? Are you protected by those people who are manned and entrusted? Because we surrender our liberty for them so that they can govern us. But the moment you realize, like others have said, that they live in a very kangaroo, a funny manner, it is funny to see that such concern will come from the diaspora. We have to sanitize this nation. Others come out at times too much. And I will tell you that a lot of those who march in Europe and in America, most often than not, they will never come back to this country. That is what some people don't even know. It is the same love for their motherland. When you watch what happened in Sierra Leone of recent and how they march throughout the world, a lot of those Sierra Leoneans will never come back to Sierra Leone. They don't even intend to come. But the country that received them, the way in which it is governed, you imagine on the installation like that of Donald Trump, people were undressing in front of the convoy of the president. Nobody was arrested or brutalized. We had 33 or 30 members of the SDF or the MRC party to display a public protest. Some are still in prison now for the 10th year. And you find that a nation that protects its citizens. We are saying it's like some people feel that they love Cameroon more than others, but the love for Cameroon by others, which is expressed to the detriment of this nation, is that a lot of them protect where they are eating and they want to protect it for good. It is funny to find a leadership where people maintain the same offices for 20 years. Hopefully, where Paddy is, there is no minister in Germany that has been in the position for the past 15 years, whose mandate is older than that of Angela Merkel, who has served for the longest time we have known the history of that nation. You get to the UK, you will tell me who has been that minister for close to 15 or 20 years, who has been that director in the public establishment for over 30 years. We are saying that 40 years after, there have been no change. A lot of diaspora, there is a need for pressure. And I'm telling you that diaspora has helped equally to, in other domains, to bring businesses here. I just quoted the example of the Menye. He's just one. And there are many Cameroonians in the corridors of ministries every day with fabulous and huge projects. But public or government bureaucracy has not really allowed some of those same Cameroonians to exercise. You need to find out that information. Cameroon is one of the least in doing business in Africa. Find those facts and you will know that a lot of companies intending to inject or to invest in Cameroon have been driven back, and most of those guys went back with their briefcases. And if we need to get into it, there is a need to change what we have in Cameroon. Yes, the citizens have a responsibility. That is why they went out to bring in earnings. And I will tell you that it was beautiful before 2016 when we received and take money for shoes, for bags, for food, and all the like. They left here knowing that they left families back home, and they have been doing greatly in feeding and sending some advantages to their families. Don't let us feel like the Cameroonian diaspora is the worst in the world. It's simply a diaspora that needs the best for their people. There are some diasporans that, like somebody said, wrote there, some African diasporas are not even noticed. It's like they don't exist. But any nation that is vigilant must carry out steps to reconcile with its diaspora. And I'm telling you that the money we borrow from some of those banks, a lot of diaspora community can give us more than 10 times money we go borrowing after those international institutions. There is a need when we reconcile and give them that assurance that their money sent back home will be highly invested and for the good of all Cameroonians. Some people will do it more. We should believe very strongly that anytime Cameroonians get angry, we have not seen violent manifestations only in Cameroon. It has happened in the United States. People should imagine the case of George Floyd and how many stores were destroyed. But I'm still to see how many were shot with live bullets and killed in that particular incident. We need to know very strongly that the world has changed and there is a need for Cameroon to move with the world. But 40 years stagnation is simply telling us that a group of some people who went to school in the 1930s and 1950s might have not come to understand that there is a new movement throughout the world that the youth should lead, and that they better understand the demands of the present generation. And why not? Cameroon should not be left out when we talk world politics, when we talk how the diaspora can contribute. Yes, yesterday, you can imagine in the quarters, a lot of people read that Ethiopia was a sovereign nation. Is it the same Ethiopia 40 years after? We need to see what happened. Try to learn good lessons from these people and see how Nigerians yesterday cry for democracy. A lot of dictatorship, coup d'etats. Where is Nigeria today? How did they manage to overcome such difficulties within governance? And today, the Nigerian diaspora remains the best in selling their own culture and international tourism for this nation. Can the Cameroonian diaspora not do more than what others have done?
Okay. Let me just get over to Mr. Paul Mondoa Ngomba. We're talking about comparing the Western democracies and what obtains today in Africa and Cameroon in particular. Is that not also a problem where the diaspora would want to readily compare where they live with African democracies that are not more than 70 years old?
Question again? I don't think I got you, please.
Yes, my question is, are we not also where we are because
maybe you speak closer to your microphone, please.
Okay, can you off your phone? Just turn off your phone. Turn off your phone, please.
Yep.
Can you mute your phone, please?
Yeah, it's mute. I can get you now.
Okay, okay. So my question to you is that are we not also where we are because there is always a tendency to wanting to compare the Western democracies with what obtains in Africa, democracies that are less than 70 years old, and the issue of public manifestations in Europe, America, and other parts of the world. How does that help Africa advance? And what is the message that are usually sent forth to the world through such giant manifestations against home countries in Africa?
Thank you very much, Mr. Leo, with that question. I would recall what I usually tell people. I tell people that Africa is at the crossroads between the East and the West, hoping to get democracy from the West and development from the East, with a greater involvement and inclination towards the Asian tigers, like you have China, you have Malaysia, and the others. And I am very grateful that the discussion has taken more or less an economic turn, and I think we can get into certain things deeper. Now, I want us to look at logically on what the predominant component of the Cameroonian diaspora does in Cameroon. Most of us have been on remittances. And when we send these remittances back home, they are used to buy rice imported from Thailand. They are used to buy fish imported from Asia and the other regions. Indirectly, the money goes through to develop those economies. What is the capital base we have built in Africa? When we even come back home, I think when they talked about the custom duties, the emphasis was on cars. Most of these cars are consumption goods to be consumed. You get a good car to come and ride in the village. The government, you have not contributed in building a tax base which can enable the government to lower tax rates. As the tax base shrinks, the government is bound to increase tax rates to raise the requisite revenue to finance most often the loans taken from the West. During the COVID-19 pandemic, when the government went through the IMF for the conditions that were laid and whatsoever, I said, if we had 18,000 Cameroonians, each buying potentially treasury bonds worth 1 million, we shall raise 180 billion. And it becomes a domestic debt, which will not subject us to the conditionalities and fluctuations of international currencies. We see what is happening now with the dollar. So I think the government has something to do, and the diaspora has to assist. We should know the limits of the rights of the diaspora, and we should know the rights and limits of the rights of the government. You cannot impose on the government, because if they put in dual nationalities today, it won't solve the problem. It won't solve the problem. On the contrary, putting dual nationality today might get us to the point of having a greater political influence from outside, which will bring about greater instability in Cameroon. I tell people most often, let us see what we can contribute in developing the country. For sure we have rights, but if you focus on just your rights, if you focus on just your privileges, then you don't do much for the betterment of all. That's what I always tell people when we get to such discussions. Now, we talked about custom duties. We talked, Dr. Akwa, I'll come back to him. He said the diaspora has been there. Same people have been in power for 40 years. And at the very beginning, he said some people went on scholarship and they have not returned. Assuming the country sent these people on scholarship to come and develop the country and the knowledge stayed in the West, where is the knowledge to develop Africa? Where is the knowledge to develop Cameroon? Where is the knowledge to define the policies that will ensure that we have good and a favorable economic environment that would stimulate development and minimize the focus on ENS and SET and the others, these state-provided jobs? I think the diaspora has done a little, which unfortunately seems to have been ruined since 2016 with the Anglophone crisis, and then 2018 with the Tontina Sardina, which keeps us very divided and very shattered. So I think we have to rethink. We have to reconstitute a force that will drive changes on the ground. And this must not be on the streets. That's what I tell people, it must not be on the streets. We destroy the embassy, you ruin the image of the country, and you take your passport to go to the next embassy to say, I'm a Cameroonian, I want to visit this country, I want to take residence in this country. It becomes problematic. So I tell people, whatever we do, let us try and look at the consequences that fall back on us. If, for example, the president visited recently a very sad experience we had here in Geneva, and you had a group of the diaspora that went on Operation Chasseman, as they called it, to chase the president out of the country, and the disorder and whatsoever. There are moments you present yourself somewhere as a Cameroonian, and they tell you, say, keep loose contre le president. I mean, it does not augur well. It does not augur well. So I would encourage greater political participation. I would encourage greater involvement in politics. I would encourage, if, like someone said, that if people could send resources to buy guns, arms back home, then they can use the same strategies to get the money. We can channel our contributions to productive sectors. We can channel our contributions to be positive. There is a possibility to get change peacefully. And I tell people we can get peace through peaceful means. We have to work to see how we build. And our failure to build, our commitment, if we fail to build, then our commitment can only destroy. If you got your dual nationality, Cameroon remains home. If you got your dual nationality, Africa remains Mother Africa. The duty towards Mother Africa should be fulfilled, and we should focus on building than destroying. We shall have the differences, but I am scared if we are divided, we'll never make progress.
Much, Mr. Mondoa Paul, coming in there from Switzerland. Good evening, Mr. Leo. We should stop mixing things. Every state has the responsibility to make good laws that will guide both diaspora and those living back at home. But some few individuals have hijacked the country and mortgaged the future of the country. Elvis is writing from Bomenda. Good evening, Mr. Leo, and the entire crew on board. Mr. Leo, a house planned to be built, if delayed, may end up not constructed. Okay, I'm sure I got that message already. Greetings to you, Mr. Leo, and all those on set. Diaspora has helped 70% in destroying Cameroon. Reason being that they don't care about the state of the citizens back home. They give instructions to burn down schools, and their own children are studying abroad. They inflict unnecessary ghost towns, and they are busy working overseas. Meanwhile, just like Apostle Ambe stipulated few weeks ago, both the government and Ground Zero have lost. I suggest that the government should swallow their ego and reason without sentimental discharge to help change the state of our beloved nation, Cameroon. Prince William is writing from Baron Bikang in Kumba. Okay, this one says, registering a company in Cameroon costs more than $3,000 and takes forever, but doesn't cost even up to $20 here in South Africa with the duration of less than 72 hours. I don't know whether that is true. This one says, our problem is our educational system. We are taught to compete with each other in class, and instead of collaborating in life, we tend to compete with each other again in real life. Society is built from collaboration and not from competition. Dinze is writing from Yaoundé. Daisy from Kumba says, good evening, Mr. Liu, and to all the panelists. Diaspora has contributed more to destroying Cameroon than building it. Good evening to you, Daisy. Yes, you had something to contribute to what we're saying?
Right, I just had some questions for our last panelist.
No, I'm the one asking the questions. Right. If you have something to say, just add to what he said.
All right, anyway, in addition to what he was saying, I think when we talk about democracy, it's the right of the people to manifest as well. Now, we've had cases where even a French president was slapped by a French citizen. An American, all the people, they are still very well respected as citizens of their countries for what they did. That's democracy. But when it comes to us, and if the masses are angry and chase out the president for lavishly spending state funds abroad, it becomes the Cameroonians are very bad. They should not present passports in other embassies. They only chased out the president. Others shot their presidents. Others slapped the president. But they are still citizens of that country. So we should also copy suit. Not only the sugar coating part, we want to please the government, please some of us who even came back from the diaspora to settle here, they should even, I think, they should award us, because it takes not only the love of the nation, it takes courage to leave whatever you are doing, your lucrative salary, to come and settle here in this country, and you don't even want to work for the government, because I, in particular, I don't see where I would like to work with this current government until things changes. So if we do not talk about the truth, face things the way they are because we want to please, individuals or get a good reputation for whatsoever benefits, the truth about this nation is we are heading to a transitional period. It's something, it's natural. Nobody will stop it. And when it comes, we will know those who stand for the truth and those who only want to please, those who were there in power at that time. Everybody living now for this government is living in the past. That's what I have to advise them.
Okay, that's what you have to advise them. But diaspora, how do we turn Cameroon's diaspora to love and want to effect the change that you want to see in Cameroon?
First of all, they must have a feeling of belonging. This is what I said from the beginning. When the state policies do not favor our diasporans, how do they have that feeling? How would they want to be part of a change in a country where they are not recognized as citizens of that country, their own fatherland? Now, we know those who are behind the crisis, the current crisis going on in the Northwest and Southwest, from the diaspora. If you call them foreigners, how would you want to sit and dialogue with them for a solution? That is my question to the state.
Okay, that's your question to the state. Paddy Asanga, you have to come in here. We're talking about getting a Cameroonian diaspora to love. We're talking about patriotism here. We all want to see Cameroon change for the good, especially a Cameroon that will put forth policies that work in favor of what the diasporas actually have been aspiring for. But how do we get that done? Getting the diaspora politically engaged.
Listen, Mr. Leo, we learn by doing and we learn by engagement. You understand? There is something that I learned prior to this Anglophone crisis and in the heat of the Anglophone crisis, which is engagement. If I tell you that I'm not talking to my friends and some of my brothers who call themselves Ambazonia, I'm a liar. If I tell you that I'm not talking to the government, I'm a liar. If I tell you that I don't engage with Francophones, I'm a liar. That is the way you go about it. If you want change, show the people, let them perceive that they will not be persecuted when you take power from them. Your message becomes receptive. But if all you spill out there is violence, oh, when we get this, we'll cut your head, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do that. The automatical human feeling is defense. That person puts on a very strong defense. And I'm one of those people who actually thinks that each time, no matter from what segment we come from, we should get ourselves involved, we should engage with one another. And that's why I keep engaging with the government. I'll tell you people something here. We are in this current situation because those who went for the tripartite, they never engaged. And today, they invited a lot of people from the diaspora, but they refused to come and participate for one reason or the other. So if you don't engage, you will not understand how to go around what is actually going on. There is this virtual world. The reality, you people are feeling it on the ground. And when you read the comments, you understand that our debate today is very balanced. But when you get onto the ground and you touch it, you feel it, you see the people. Like when I was sitting with Dr. John Ako, I got to know who he is, apart from just engaging with him virtually like that. No. So we should have meetings amongst us, not only village Njangi group, but something like a think tank, how we can engage the system. When I'm talking about the system, it has to also do with our neo-colonial masters, which are people like France, Britain, and so on and so forth. When you go and you start, I listened to one white girl. He was saying that when you go and you start abusing Britain and so on, blah, 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 but you want favor from Britain, how do you expect them to give you that favor? How do you? So the engagement I'm talking about, I'm talking to so many parliamentarians across the board. be it CPDM, SDF, and so on and so forth, even UNDP. We are talking. And we are talking about change. We are talking about the Third Republic. I'm happy that it has been recognized here that we are going. This is we are undergoing a transition period. That transition period will come with engagement. Engage all the actors. Don't abuse them. Don't insult them. When you do that, you get the opposite of what you want. And I think that the diaspora should get herself more involved and in a very subtle manner, but not with this violent, condescending, and arrogant rhetoric that comes from left, right, center. It will not work. You cannot do that with any person in the world. The automatic survival instinct or defensive way of doing things will kick in. That is in the nature of human being. And I think that's the way I look at it. And I don't know what others think, but I think that it is engagement, engagement, engagement. Never boycott any opportunity that you have to go and tell your own story. Lobby for what you want. Meet people who think and can sympathize with you. So that's what I'm saying, Mr. Leo. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Leo, and to all the panelists. Diaspora has contributed more in destroying Cameroon than building it. Mr. Leo, I think building our country is not by talking political issues. I think it's by bringing back what they achieved from the diaspora to help and build our country. And I think it's about the high taxes that discourages them from coming back to the country. Tata Cyprian, writing from Gaundal, if we succeeded in destroying our own properties, we will rebuild them for us. Good evening, Mr. Leo, and to all of you in the studio, and to you all in the educative, both the diaspora and those in ground zero are not collaboration. Okay, the English not too good. I think that is their main problem. Okay. Good evening, Mr. Kum. Is Cameroon destroyed only these 5 years? It seems all Cameroon problems are now heaped on those 5 to 6 years. Mr. Asanga thinks we are talking about the crisis. Pa Peter is writing from Limbe. Good evening, Mr. Leo. Paddy Asanga said our Cameroon diaspora is so divided to a point that they can't contribute in building the country. Is he not aware that the government of Cameroon enjoys that division? If they unite, they will lobby for laws that will not favor them. Chu writing from Kumba. Greetings to you all on board. Mr. Leo, I enjoy your program so much. With my humble opinion, the diaspora are destroying Cameroon. In fact, they have destroyed Cameroon. They are there with their families doing well and passing orders for lockdowns or no school. If they succeed to separate who are those going to apply for jobs or run the companies, stark illiterates or non-entities, even if they get the independence, they will still fight within themselves because they are already fighting positions within themselves right now. Mari Taku writing from Boya. Stay blessed and stay safe. Thank you very much, Mari. Now, we are looking at the diaspora and Cameroon for collaboration. We are not looking at who is building, who is destroying. The future, what should be the current and future posture of the diaspora for the good of Cameroon?
Mr. Leo, I want to begin by making this statement that the purpose of your education is not for you to come and be a politician nor to work in the government. The purpose of your education is for you to come and create jobs for the country. And so I think most of our diasporians and brothers who actually took the advantage to go learn from the white man, what we needed from them is to come back with this know-how and actually execute it on the ground for those who are here to be able to benefit from them. If the target is only to look at how to participate in the government, then there is a problem with their reason for wanting to come back to the country. It is not a bad thing because this every individual's right to choose what they want. But I think once you are educated, for most of them who are out there, they should have learned already that the West does not depend on the government. It depends on the private sector. And so it is our responsibility to build that aspect. And when we look at the idea of collaboration. You know, when we talk about the diaspora coming to build, we are not indirectly saying that it is their responsibility alone. It is also the responsibility of everyone that is back here at home. You see, I was going through, since I've been talking much about the remittance that comes from the diaspora to Cameroon, I was looking across the law that was signed last time concerning the fact that any mobile transactions will be taxed. Whether it is money that is coming through War Remit, it is coming through Western Union or whatsoever, it is being taxed on a double face. That particular law is one of the reasons why I think some of this money, instead of coming, will reduce. And so I think the Cameroon government at times should think well before they do what they are doing. Remember last time they came up with a law where they said if you have to just buy a phone, you need to pay import tax. Those are some of the things that discourage a lot of persons in this country. And that is why I made mention of the fact that it seems as if this country had been hijacked, or I should just use the word, the country had been hijacked. And for close to 40 years, let's even say, let's put it from 1990 to now. Let's not go back to the 80s. From 1990 to now, this country has been under a spell. And I think it is necessary that those who are running the affairs of the country should think towards the future of the country. When you look at the project that the president brought up towards the development of the country, 2035, I am trying to imagine how it is going to happen only with taxpayers' money in the country. It is not going to be a reality if we have to depend on the tax system that we have created. It is rather going to limit the progress and the productivity of the nation. So I think to encourage these diasporians to step in and invest, because that should be one of our greatest cry. Let them come in and invest. Investment, creating businesses will create jobs, creating companies will create jobs, and help the government in securing a lot of anger that is in the air. If most of the policies that are put in place, the taxation laws that are put in place, and all that are actually regulated, and these diaspora are encouraged to step in and invest, create businesses, establish different organizations that will permit that young Cameroonians can be able to gain access to the market, or say to the employment market, then it will help. It will reduce a lot of things. Okay. So, Mr. Leo, it is funny when we actually want to put the blame on you see, I am talking because I am speaking from both sides. When you look at the diaspora, they have their faults. When you come back to Cameroon, Cameroon as a state has its faults. And so there is need for both sides to actually think out strategies on how to work out things and see how this nation can move ahead. And majorly, I will speak and say, let the government of Cameroon adjust a lot of things when it comes to importation, investment, because the rice that we buy, the toothpick that we buy, and all that we import from Europe, if companies, these boys, these guys, these ladies can come from Europe, diasporans, and from the United States, and wheresoever, and invest, we could create those things here.
Okay.
And we will work the rice, multiply the farms, and you end up realizing that we'll stop importing, and we'll have a lot to eat from home. So we should stop importing.
Good evening, Mr. Leo, and fine breath on the panel. Dr. Bisson, writing from Kumba. Good evening also to you, Esther, watching from Kumba, chief town of Meme Division. Good evening, Mr. Leo and entire crew. How on earth do you expect Cameroonians to love their country, whereas the powers that be have no love in the nation? Before, the Amber Dream was born for the English-speaking regions, while BAS was born for the French-speaking regions. As of now, I believe they have been alienated Good evening, Mr. Leo. The Cameroonian diaspora are being blocked to excel by the government. Only those diasporas that can talk good about the government are recognized. The diasporas, be it French or English, are the ones to build the new Cameroon. The government should also listen to the diaspora for modify their archaic ideas. Fred Fang writing from Mutengene. Good evening to you, Mr. Leo. Just enjoying your program. Pache is writing from Kumba. Good evening, Mr. Leo. And B in Bamenda. I support what they are saying. Good evening, Mr. Leo. There's so much change we talk about in Cameroon, be it through the contribution of our diaspora or Cameroonians at home, can only come from the ballot box. How many of us Cameroonians youth, both home and abroad, get registered in the voters register? If we want change, we should vote out the system that is not willing to change. Chu is writing from Kumba. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Our members of the diaspora want to take part in the country's political affairs rather than investing in economic activities. That's where the problem is. Shukwi is writing from Chang. Okay, Dr. Ako, what do we do to get to birth a synergy between the diaspora and those back home?
Yeah, really, if the government need to act, if Cameroonians need to go, there is a need of, first of all, identifying the obstacles that prevent the diaspora from intervening in the development of the nation. And if we need to do that, some people are talking, really, we take it very lightly. After the increase in remittance cost, the fare to transfer money from one part to another, what people don't even know now is that the dollars that they used to send does not come again. People simply call their relatives home, say, give this man 100,000. I will handle it with a sister who is here. So a lot of people don't know it again. This is part of the failure within a system that was supposed to get into doing well in signing what we call remittance agreements, bilateral or multilateral. Cameroon can get into countries and nations, sign some agreement that permits or reduces remittance costs in terms of fare or the cost of transferring money to in and out of Cameroon and even from those other nations. Within it, we don't even, Cameroonian government need to carry an assessment of the force of its diaspora. Some people said there are about 4 million Cameroonians throughout the world as diasporans. And how many have we identified? What are their portfolio? What can they do? We need to identify the force of our diaspora. Then if we can identify them, there is a need to go on a reconciling mission because we need them. And a lot of people should equally understand that the West, the policy of what we talk of brain drain, can be transferred or invested to become a brain gain trust, which means those who went out for studies, can we encourage them to come back home? There are a lot of nations. In fact, I'm not going with what people like Gaddafi in Libya did before dying, is that any Libyan that went abroad, studied, and was coming back to invest, the government was the one to give you funds to invest in your domain. I want to equally recognize a lot of Ghanaians in that line when it comes to education. Education has become one of the reasonable impetus or raw materials for technology transfer. Those who studied abroad in many US and UK universities are now back in Ghana trying to fix the educational situation of that very country. Can Cameroon equally go in that line? Yes, a lot in Cameroon too. What Cameroonians don't know is that most of the tourism sites, hotels, leisure environment created and built in Cameroon are owned by most diaspora. A lot of hotels in town are owned by them. Some of them own huge magazines that house some of those cars we're talking about. Parties should know that some of those cars in Cameroon are not only for leisure, some of those cars today are center for businesses. Some people now have gone into car rentals. And when you go to those areas, you will realize that a lot are coming from the diaspora. We need to understand that there are a lot of obstacles and then we need to move forward with it. If Cameroon need to do well, we should consider that the Cameroonian diaspora is the one that can become very friendly. Can we reconcile it? Why the violence between diaspora and his home government? If that is done, I'm telling you that the enabling environment, why not? In other nations, there is a whole directorate in charge of diaspora, which means that the problems faced by the diaspora are directed to a particular quarter. That would mean solving individual problems one-on-one. If you have a problem and you're a Cameroonian, you channel it to this particular institution and it should be managed. Cameroon has become what it is because of what we call a failure in institutions. We have strong men. We lack strong institutions. There is a need to give power to institutions because a single person cannot have the monopoly of knowledge and experience or professionalism. There is a need for stronger institutions so that Cameroon can grow as a whole. When power is over-concentrated on a single leader, in fact, the arrogance of some administrative officials has even worsened the situation. Can a Cameroonian see that the position given to him by the government was to serve Cameroonians? You go to some places, I'm telling you, if you're not just cold-tempered, you can be put even to give a slap or ask really if this institution is in Cameroon. Some people think like it was a right and not a privilege to serve. When you have to serve the people, we learn from the principles in the Bible that Jesus took his time to wash the feet of his 12 apostles. It was not by a joke, it is a thought of humility. When you are identified among many Cameroonians, you have a duty to serve. This arrogance that we are sitting on an armchair and there are some people who must creep or bow before us has caused a lot of pain. The government of Cameroon need to be humble. I mean, we have seen that in other nations. When ministers visit abroad from other nations, we know how they receive them. Take around a leader, a chief of your village visiting your community in Douala. How do we respond? And what changes? Why has it changed that it is not the same when an elite, a minister visits a foreign nation where Cameroonians are? Then something is not going right. Once there is a problem, then there should always be a search for a solution to equalize the forces and maybe neutralize. If it means writing an international apology, we need it to be done. There is a need to transform diaspora finance into profit and developmental aspect back home. I set and I insist on what I call government diaspora bonds. Cameroon government should identify those diaspora that can invest in this country, and why not give them even free will, and why not some amenities, land if they need land, if they need facilities, the government can make that so that it happen. It's going to a long way to harness that relationship between the Hope government and the diaspora. There's a lot we can do, and I think that we can fix it all. We need a new Cameroon, a new thought, and a new mindset.
Okay. I'll take some of the messages. Good evening, Mr. Liu, the entire crew. How on earth do you expect these persons to kill themselves and still kill themselves for the nation? Good evening, Mr. Liu. Just enjoying your program. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Good evening, Mr. Liu. I want to thank God for your team. Brother Paddy has been very objective today. I like that spirit. Can others copy that? More grace to your elbows. Brother Fred writing from Bamenda. I'm happy with the speakers, okay? Hi, Mr. Liu and team. Opening up to the diaspora is shutting down the channels through which government individuals enrich themselves. That is auto-flagellization. Good evening, Mr. Liu. Mr. Neville from Kumba, when you send money, you pay tax. You receive money, you pay tax. Yes. You import goods, you pay double for customs. How does this motivate Cameroonians to come back home? Please, Mr. Liu, permit me come back to the second time. The big guns in Cameroon do not watch private TV channels, which can also educate themselves. Just see the best of you guys talking now. Let just pray for God to change their minds for betterment. By Elias writing from Malabo. Good evening, Mr. Liu and members of the panel. Good contributions. Mr. Liu, your cream of panelists today is great, okay? This, now, Mr. Mondoa, you are watching from the Switzerland, and you think that there is something and a lot that the Cameroonian diaspora must do to turn the tide. What, according to you, should the Cameroonians diaspora do? What should they be doing to get things fixed for themselves and the nation, so that we can also be very, very proud of the diaspora that we have, and they themselves could be proud of what they are doing for the growth of the nation?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Liu, for this question. Now, there is something that has to be brought up very clearly. When I followed the discussions from the panelists with you there is one thing that appears
very recurrent in their interventions, the whole idea of dual nationality is perceived to be one of those capital drivers of the diaspora engaging actively with the country. But there is a fundamental question that remains unanswered. The question of dual nationality can only be answered by those who have the Cameroonian nationality as it stands. This, I'm talking about parliamentarians and senators, the lawmakers. How many diaspora, the guys from the Cameroonian diaspora have actually engaged to channel their concerns through their elected representatives? If this question is not answered, the dual nationality question will never be answered on the streets. It will never be answered on the street. And this, you permit me to pull a little into the Anglophone crisis, which is one of the drivers that even brings the question of the diaspora being part of the destructive elements in Cameroon. Now, I hear a lot of people clamoring for inclusive dialogue, which I support. But the question I want to ask is, would you have people who have not got their Cameroonian nationality to discuss on policies in Cameroon, while Cameroonians struggling with the reality on the ground are excluded from that dialogue, and you call it inclusive? Let's be realistic. The diaspora is losing something, which no one refutes. But the way to get it back is to liaise with those back home with the capability and the legitimacy to negotiate for it. Unfortunately, the laws that we inherited back in the 60s made this whole issue of dual nationality not being a reality. But if we think it is imperative, how do we work to get it back? How do we get it restored for us to exploit it? That's one. Now I want to come back to, we hammered a lot on the economic dimensions. I take Cameroon just like any other African state. We are in a mess when it comes to the monetary policies, especially French Africa, and fiscal policies. It's easy to blame the government. The government has done this, the government has done that. But I will try that we go a little above this activism and political inclinations to look at the fundamentality of what obtains with the African states. You can't tell me a country can develop without its own currency. If the diaspora can mobilize, if the diaspora can unite and give this assurance to the government that we can stand for you, we can insure you, then the government can take on measures to address this whole issue of, for example, the franc CFA, that plays a crucial role in defining the economic security of the country that will attract investment. If we come to invest in Cameroon today under the current arrangement, and tomorrow you hear that the franc CFA has been devalued, for example, because it's not within the control of the government. These are fundamental questions I think we should be looking at. Instead of running forward, running backward, trying to pull down a government, I would believe that we should focus more on getting the country solid. The currency can be devalued today. You don't have control over that. It can be devalued today. And if you have invested, no matter how much you have invested in the country, it will be devalued. These are some of the things that keeps the diaspora away. If you want to analyze it monetarily, there are certain things that would keep the enlightened diaspora from not investing in Cameroon. And it has to do fundamentally with the state of the state. Like, how solid is the state when it comes to its independence? The blame is very easy to be put on the government. But the question one fails to understand is, does the government itself have full control of its rights? Does the government itself has full control of its sovereignty?
I'm coming back to you, Mr. Mondoa. I'm coming back to you. Let's take a short break and we continue with the conclusion of this program.
You don't.
It's not dark, it's bright. Black is bold. Black is every color, all together. My thing, your thing, our thing mixed together. Black shines bright. Drink it in.
Okay, you're watching Prime Hour on my Media Prime. This time around, I'll just be concluding maybe with you, Mr. Tata, for the way forward between the diaspora and those back here. How do we get the diaspora also play a pivotal role on the driving seat of this nation?
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Kum. I think at the end of the day, we all are agreeing on the same thing, which I started by stating that whatsoever we point at depends on the policy of the state. Once the state puts in place favorable policies that can ensure the growth, the development of the country, being it by the nationals or by diasporians, it's going to go a long way to form a synergy. People will be encouraged. They will have the feeling of belonging. They will want to invest back home. Now, if we have policies that restrict a certain number of Cameroonians who cannot even come back home, how do you expect them to develop the country? You expect them to invest in that same country where they are not recognized as citizens? We have a conflict situation. We have a problem at hand. We're looking at ways forward at ways to solve this problem. Now, the main actors are those we do not even recognize as Cameroonians, but they remain the biggest problem, or the brain behind the problem. So if you do not give them a chance to come and sit with you and talk about this problem and look for a way forward and dialogue, how do you expect to solve the problem when the major actor is not being considered as a member of, as a citizen of the state? So to me, I think the government should rethink on policies that will encourage those in the diaspora to come back home and invest. If a diasporan is buying a car for 10 million, he will not like to clear that car for 30 million. Never. These are the things that are discouraging us from investing back in our country. Taxes everywhere. Citizens have to pay 3 times what they even earn as taxes to the government. And the irony is that money is being embezzled here, sent back abroad by the state in foreign banks, while Cameroonians hustle out there, send the money to them, they send back there. At the end of the day, we are talking about growth. We look at GDP, all these things. The state is responsible for the economic growth of this country. It is not the diasporans. The diasporans can only be a contributor. They can only give in their own share, and they cannot do more than what they are doing because they are not the main actors responsible for economic growth. Let the elected officials, the government of the state, take over their responsibilities.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Leo. Just like the French president, when he came, only welcome with the prime minister. Can it change? Blessing, writing from Amanda. Good evening, Mr. Leo. I greet everyone listening to this channel. It's Mr. Bernard from Gusi. Cameroon law are just as a woman love. Any person who says that he or she knows what is happening in Cameroon, meaning the person is half Jesus. I love your programs. Mr. Leo Ihimru is writing from famous Swiss. Good evening to you, my brother Ihimru. Yes, along the way to Kribi. The diaspora should advise the population to register on the voters list because things will change only through the ballot box. Let us look at what is going on now in Nigeria with the Obi movement. Nemo Bisong is writing in Cap Cameroon. Good evening, Mr. Leo. Nobody would want to work at a particular part of the farm covered by soldier ants. It's like every area of this country is occupied by ants. How then would we expect the diaspora to come? Let us drive the ants away. Who betides are those who invited the ants. We should change the old set new rules and stick to them. We should deliver ourselves from new colonialism and call on God. Okay. Echani Joseph writing from Yaoundé. Good evening, Mr. Liu and the panel. Mr. Liu, I'm Mr. Tony from Abat village in Southwest region. I love your program. When Dr. Ako is on set, please let my people should get what Dr. Ako is saying. Mr. Liu, no one will buy wisdom from the market. I love that man's words. These are the type of people we need in the government of my country. God bless you all. Good evening, Mr. Leo. Mr. James from Kumba. I enjoy your programs. The Cameroon diaspora has the knife, but the government has the yam. The two must come to terms for the lay Cameroonians to enjoy. Nepotism, bribery, and corruption have killed Cameroon government policy. Good evening, Mr. Liu. I like most Cameroonian diaspora we not invest in the country because of heavy taxes imposed on them. Good evening. How can we meet up with when Ambas have sent all the farmers away from their farms? Only when all the farmers go back to the farms, okay? We are also running up with you. Paddy Asanga, your last words, please. Just 2 minutes.
Leo, there is something I want to make very clear here.
Be brief, please.
Because we tend to. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
So there is something I want to make very clear here. When I talk about engagement, you don't eat your cake and have it. Remember, just to present certain things, we have to get politically educated. Most of us who are here in the diaspora, despite from which angle we are coming from, to be able to impact policy. There was a time when the government of Cameroon sent out people out here to come and meet the diaspora, but some of my friends decided not to engage with them. So when you do something like that, who again is going to speak for you? Who? You have an opportunity. You don't like it. They say they are making pre-talks. You go there, listen, engage them, give your own point of view. Whether they consider it or not, you would have done your civic job as some person who thinks that you want to participate in nation building. When what I'm doing, I'm not doing it for Mr. Biya's government. Mr. Biya is a puppet of France. I'm doing it for Cameroonians. But by default, they are the ones in power. What do you do? What do you do? So this is a position that I hold strongly to. I hold to my chest. And I will not forget to tell our brothers and sisters of the diaspora, and particularly the Northwest and Southwest, that they will live to regret the cardinal whom they call and vilified and so on. Because without us having that collective internal debate as a political entity that left Nigeria, because when we are talking about destruction, we know what is happening in our regions. So we need to have that conversation and prepare ourselves to engage in what they call inclusive dialogue or not. So it is just like you eat your cake and you have it. When you don't engage, you don't participate, who wins? It's the de facto person who is in power.
Thank you very much, Paddy.
Win.
Paddy, thank you. Thank you. We are out of time.
You're welcome.
Okay. Your last words also. I'll give you 2 minutes also.
We have said a lot of things here, and I want to conclude on a point that our brother in Switzerland actually brought up, considering the fact that it is impossible to actually develop a nation without a currency. Cameroon does not have its own currency. Cameroon does not keep the reserves of its currency, and that actually plays a lot when it comes to not only bargaining with external powers and forces, but also on investment. Those who leave the diaspora to come invest in Cameroon, their businesses can face devaluation at any time, yes, but I want to tell my brother also that once money is invested and it is already in commodities, the commodity called money, if it loses its value, the commodity you invested in will not lose its value. So you can't claim that when you invest money, then maybe invest in Cameroon, you will lose the money. No, you will not. Instead, you will benefit if there is a devaluation and you had already built a hotel. You bought land and invested something in it, you gain more. So I think we should rather say, encourage the diasporans to take what they have, come back to Africa, come to Cameroon, invest it here in Cameroon, and it will give them more. But we will also want to say, let the government do everything possible to make sure Cameroon has its own currency, in order to sustain that balance that is needed.
Okay, we have come to the end of today's edition of the program. Thank you for coming, Dr. Aku.
Mr. Leo, it's a pleasure sharing on this topic. And if there is one thing Cameroonians and the world at large should know, that the America is built by diaspora.
Okay.
That Israel is built by diaspora. And that India today, China depends on Chinese diaspora.
Okay.
There is a need to have the diaspora as a necessary force
Yes.
for the development of this country.
Amen.
Mr. Mondoa Paul, thank you for being part of today's edition of Prime Hour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leo. It's been a privilege, and I look forward to engaging back with Fatherland Cameroon on issues like this. This is a contribution to building the state we have to build. Thanks very much, and hopefully you invite me again shortly. Thanks a million.
Okay, thank you to Paddy for coming today. Seemingly Paddy's gone. Thank you, Mr. Tata, for coming.
My pleasure.
And to you, Prof, thank you. We also want to say thank you to all of you who took time off to watch this edition of the program, Desmond and Eli. I'm eternally grateful to you two guys for always being there for this program. We say stay blessed. Bye-bye.